Hey friends, I'm so excited to finally get to sit down and record some tutorials. I have been working for the past 3 or 4 months trying to get my year's worth of content ready for Patreon, and finally I am to the tutorial section. I'm going to show you how to make these magnetic, movable color swatches for your watercolor. So I'm excited about this tutorial. Let's get started. We're going to need a paper towel, paintbrush, watercolor, clean rinse water, a waterproof pen. I recommend a Micron 01 or Zig Memory system writer. You'll need a ruler, a pencil, scissors, a sheet of watercolor paper, 5 inches by 8 inches, adhesive magnetic sheeting in the same size, 5 by 8, 140-pound watercolor paper. Optional tools would be a straight-edged cutting tool and a heat tool or hairdryer. Okay, the first thing we're going to start with are these adhesive magnetic sheets. I was able to find mine at my local Walmart for about $2. I think they were $1.97. I could be wrong on that. They might have been $2.97, but I really think that they were $1.97. So you can find them at Walmart or possibly on Amazon. There comes 2 in a package, and they're just these magnetic sheets that have this peelable backing, and once you peel it, there's adhesive under there. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover the adhesive part with watercolor paper. So I have this scrap piece that I've started swatching on. I'm going to use the part that I have not used yet to cover my magnetic sheet. You can do this 2 ways. I'm going to use my paper cutter to cut my watercolor, but you can definitely do this with scissors. If you're using scissors, I would just recommend placing the adhesive sheet on top of your watercolor paper and tracing around it like this and cutting it out. Okay, I'm going to use my paper cutter. Just going to put this right on here like this. Peel this backing off of the sheet. Position it how I want it. It's okay if I have to reposition, as long as I haven't pressed down on it to really get the stick going. Okay, so now it looks about the way I want. Well, it's a little off up here, so you can reposition it pretty easily. Okay, that looks pretty good, and then I'm just gonna press down on it. I don't have a real mathematical, scientific way to tell you to do this. These are pretty much the same size as my half pans. They're a tiny bit bigger, but they work fine. They fit just fine in my pan, and I'm happy with this size. If you want a more precise, more exact size, you can actually use a half pan or a full pan, whatever size pan you're wanting to make a swatch for. Turn it upside down and trace around that, and that's how big your swatch will be. My swatches, they're 11/16 by 3/4. I'm going to take a minute and just go through and make a little notch with my pencil every 11/16 on my ruler. I'm just going to do 3/4. I think it's pretty close. It's like in the middle. So let's just do 3/4 to keep it simple. And we'll do the same on the sides, every 3/4. And let's start with the side down here that we've already marked. Okay, so you'll have a little bit of a margin left on both the top and the side. We're going to do the same thing on the other edges just so that we have a straight line. Then once you get that done, you'll go through and you'll make little lines. Line up your ruler and make a line from this mark to this mark. I'm going to grab my paper cutter. I'm going to go ahead and make cuts. This is what I have. I have these strips and I still need to make cuts this way, but at this point I think it's going to be easier to just use my scissors to do this. So I'm just going to go through and make these cuts on these lines here. There are two ways I'm going to show you. You can paint before. I'm going to cut these little pieces that are too short off. You can go ahead and cut them and then paint them, or you can paint them and then cut them. I'm going to do it both ways so you can see which way you like better. I'm going to go ahead and trim these squares that are too short, and I will just set those aside for now. And we're going to want to write the names of our colors on our squares before we paint. If you do not have a waterproof pen, you're going to want to get one, because if it gets wet it's going to bleed. Okay, you can do this two ways. You can paint before you cut, or you can cut first and then paint. I prefer to cut first and then paint, but I'm going to show you both ways. I have a micron 01 size. You can also use the Zig Memory System Writer. This is one of my favorite pens. It's a dual tip pen and I love it. It's waterproof. I just love this pen, but it's out of ink and my new ones have not arrived yet. This one works just as well. I'm going to use this one. It's a micron 01 and I'm just going to go through and write the names of the colors that I'm going to be doing on my swatch squares. If you're painting before you cut, obviously you need to stay within the square lines. So you also may need to abbreviate because some of the names are kind of long. This one is Teardrop Pools, so I'm just going to write Once you get them all written out, I like to place mine on a paper towel just to keep my workstation clean. Spray my watercolor and get it activating. I have my water and my paintbrush. I like to wet the entire thing first. And drop the color. Let it do its thing. Gray in Nature is next. And then on this sheet that has not been cut yet, I will wet every other square. So I'll start with this first one, and then I'll skip this square, and I will wet this one, skip this one, every other one. We're gonna wet every other one. First one is hazy, and I'm just gonna do the same thing that I did with the pre-cut squares. Skip Sasquatch with the second square, and I'm gonna do the next one, which is in the shade. Some green undertones in that gray. Next is pots of clay. Okay, so now we have to let these dry before we can do these others. This is one reason that I like to do the pre-cut, because I can just get them all done with one stride. I don't have to wait for these colors to dry before I can continue. Another reason that I prefer to do pre-cuts is because you can see on a few of them, this brown is bleeding into this square, and this brown is bleeding into both squares next to it. Payne's gray is bleeding into here, this one's bleeding into here. I just like for my colors to be only those colors with no bleed from other colors next to it. But once they're dry, you can sometimes hide that. You can do however you like to do it. I just prefer this method. Okay, now I've just dried these with my heat tool, and I'm gonna go through and wet the squares that I haven't done yet, but I'm gonna try not to touch the line because I don't want it to go into the color next to it if I can help it. This is a very opaque color and it's bleeding over the words, so I'm just going to push that paint back a little bit. So the title, Seek My Secret Pistachio. Okay, so now I'm back and I have dried these with my heat tool. You can let yours air dry, or you can use a hair dryer or your heat tool. There's one that I see is not really a true representative of the color, so I'm just gonna add some more to Strong Like Judy. Oops. Now you can go through and cut your strip of swatches. And do you see how this one has some brown on it? I don't like that. So that's what, that's why I prefer that other method. Now we can take our swatches and move them around, put them where we want them. I kind of like all my colors together so that when I need a red, I can look at my reds and go, okay, which one do I want to use? I like this one, so I'm going to use this one. I'll do that with the blues. But when you get a new color, if you have your swatches all in one piece and you get a new color, let's say I just got this Peep the Faith blue, what do? It's all on one piece of paper. Now I can move this around and it's not a big deal. I can pull this down, and they're pretty strong magnets, so they're not going to fall off here. They're not going to cause trouble for you to move. And I'm going to put it here because this looks like where it would go. I have a few other blues that I want to put in. This one. So you can just move them around how you want them. This is how you make magnetic swatches. And I hope y'all had a great time. I hope that if you do it, you will show me your magnetic swatches. Please do that. I would love to see. And I will see you on social media somewhere.